I'm 48. My name is Natalie. I've been living in my mother-in-law's house for the past 2-3 years to help taking care of her as she suffers from dementia. Natalie, I want to go for a walk, but I can't find my sock. Do you know where it might be? I've looked everywhere. Mother-in-law, aren't you wearing 2 socks on your right foot? Oh my, you're right. I wonder why my right foot felt so odd. Since my mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia, I've been living with her. But because her symptoms are still mild, it's not too much of a burden to help her with her daily tasks. Well, wearing 2 socks might be keeping your foot warm, isn't it? Now that you mention it, it does feel warm. I've heard that people with dementia can become easily irritable, but my mother-in-law is like a little girl and she's quite lighthearted. The stress from taking care of her is relatively minimal compared to what I imagined. Alright, now that your socks are on, shall we go for a walk? With her socks properly on, my mother-in-law and I set out for our daily walk. Even though her dementia is relatively mild, I can't let her go out on her own. As I continue to work from home, I take care of her. While there are surprises and moments of concern, our leisurely walks are incredibly peaceful. By the way, I haven't seen Matt's face around. If he is causing trouble outside, I'll give him a stern scolding. At dinner, my mother-in-law spoke out loud. Matt is on a business trip. This one's been long, but he'll be back tomorrow. Oh, so he's not around because of work. I thought he might be goofing off somewhere. Her expression of disappointment at hearing he was on a business trip made me smile despite myself. Were you really planning to scold him? In truth, my husband Matt is a good person, but he tends to be a little lax about various things. This can be a bit disappointing. He tends to lose track of time when working or pursuing his hobbies, and he is so loose with money that I have to give him his allowance in installments. Whenever I have concerns about my husband's behavior, my mother-in-law always steps in and sternly corrects him on my behalf. Her logical way of saying, befitting her scientific background, is always so convincing that my husband ends up without a word to say. I always find his flustered expression at these times quite amusing. The relationship between my mother-in-law and me is far better than the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship, and we've been able to live together quite harmoniously. However, as my mother-in-law pointed out, my husband has recently been away from home on business trips more often. While my income has decreased since moving in, my husband says he'll earn more to make up for it, but it's a complicated feeling for me. The reason is that while my income has decreased, our living expenses, such as rent, have been reduced by living together. So the family's finances haven't changed much compared to before. Consequently, I find myself wishing he could come home earlier from work and cherish the time he spends with my mother-in-law. Especially in the last 3 months, his continual business trips and late arrivals home had been bothering me. This occurred on the day my husband returned from one of his business trips. As usual, when I tried to take out the laundry from his business trip from his bag, I found an unfamiliar pair of underwear. Are these your underwear? Oh, well, of course. I just asked casually, but my husband's face changed color and he seemed flustered. There's no need to be so surprised. It's just different from the underwear I usually buy for you, so I was wondering about it. Ah, I bought those underwear myself. The ones I brought with me were old and torn, so I threw them away and bought new ones. But all the underwear I prepared for you were new. They were already torn? They were new? Maybe they were defective. I see. Well, there's nothing to be done if they got torn. Even as I said this, my husband's suspicious behavior made me feel uneasy. Hey, don't you think his behavior is strange, Mike? I found myself muttering to Mike, the stray cat. Mike is a stray cat that my mother-in-law adores. He has also grown attached to me, and we often spend time together. Of course, I know that when I talk to Mike, The only response I get is a meow. I became curious and checked his back one more time. There was a faint scent of perfume. Could he be cheating? As I spoke while stroking Mike's belly, he placed his soft paw on my hand in response. Are you trying to comfort me? Meow, meow. Shall we thoroughly investigate him? What do you mean? Do you think he's suspicious? If something feels off, we need to act immediately. He's a careless person. He won't be able to keep secrets. We should be able to find evidence easily. My mother-in-law was smiling, almost as if she was enjoying this. Mother-in-law, are you hoping to find evidence of cheating? I had been conversing with my mother-in-law in a joking manner, but after giving it some thought, I decided to investigate my husband. This isn't because I suspect him, but rather because I want to prove his innocence. However, you've gotta be kidding. The investigation report that arrived contained information I wasn't expecting. My husband returned late from his business trip, and as he sprawled on the sofa and sighed, I'm tired, I began to speak to him in a flat tone. I want to talk about something important. Perhaps he sensed my tension, because he quickly sat up, straightened his posture, and turned to face me. Don't you have something you need to tell me? What are you talking about? Seeing my husband so visibly flustered, I sighed inwardly. I'll ask you again. Do you have something you need to tell me? Natalie, what's going on? What happened all of a sudden? Do you have something you need to tell me? Well, do you? Just like when my mother-in-law confronts my husband, I imitate her, persistently asking him while looking him in the eyes. Unable to endure this situation, my husband looked down. Well, I'm sorry. Actually about half of my business trips were made up. After that, my husband didn't say another word and remained silent with his head down. If you didn't go on those business trips, who did you spend those days with? Well, if you weren't on a business trip, where were you? Well, it's just Natalie. The more I interrogated him, the more sweat ran down his forehead and his eyes darted around nervously. There's no doubt that you lied about the business trip and met with someone, right? No, well, that's... Seeing my husband so agitated, I felt a tightening in my chest. Do you think kids are cute? Yes. What are we talking about, children? His face turned even paler. Do you remember the underwear that was in your bag when you returned from your business trip? I was worried about the faint smell of perfume, so I decided to have you investigated. I then placed the photos and investigation report showing my husband, his mistress, and their child having fun in front of him. I had a relationship with her once, but it was years ago. As soon as I found out she was married, I completely cut off contact. After finally starting to speak, he began to spill everything all at once. Then, about 3 months ago, she suddenly appeared. She's a single mother now, struggling, and wanted to talk to me about her things. And then we ended up in the same kind of relationship again. She asked me to remarry her, but I told her I couldn't divorce you, Natalie. I really refused, believe me. While making excuses, he occasionally looked at me, as if to gauge my reaction. Then she told me that the child was mine, and when I argued back that we'd only had a relationship once years ago, she suggested a DNA test. The results of the test said that the child was mine, and I was told that the reason for her divorce was because she found out the child wasn't from her ex-husband. The child is now attached to me as if I'm his real father. I couldn't abandon him. That's why my husband, who had been talking rapidly, suddenly fell silent. What do you want to do now? Well, Seeing my husband unable to make a clear decision, I sighed heavily in my heart. You were planning to keep this a secret forever, weren't you? What's your plan? Well, I manage the account where your salary is deposited. So I was wondering why your salary didn't increase despite all the overtime and business trips. Then I found out unfamiliar underwear and even a scent of perfume. With all this evidence, don't you think it would be strange not to suspect anything? Well, for now, I want you to think carefully about what to do next. If this child is yours, as a parent, you have to do the right thing. Let's talk again in a week. Shockingly, 5 days after this day, on the weekend, my husband took a drastic action. Hey, Natalie! I rushed to my mother-in-law, who was calling me in a loud voice. She held an envelope addressed to me and a divorce paper with a surprised expression. The divorce paper was fully filled out in my husband's section and even had a stamp on it. Inside the envelope was a letter from my husband. To Natalie, I've thought about this a lot and decided to leave this house. Now, above all, I need to think about the child's future. I can't abandon them knowing the child and she are having a hard time. I never wanted a child, but I've grown fond of the child who clings to me so much and find them unbearably cute. I want you to divorce me. For the sake of taking responsibility as a father, I will live with her and a child. Please live with my mother. I trust you with my mother. I know you two get along well and can live together. Thanks, Matt. What happened? Please tell me what happened. I couldn't contain my emotions, and I cried loudly while telling my mother-in-law. She gently stroked my back all the while. After hearing my story, my mother-in-law read my husband's letter and hugged me tightly. It's pitiful. I can't forgive Matt's selfishness. He needs to feel the consequences of his actions. Depending on your decision, Natalie, I intend to confront my son. Please don't worry about me. Just tell me what you want to do. I want to support you, Natalie. From my mother-in-law's demeanor, I could feel a strong, intense anger like I've never experienced before. She has only scolded my husband on my behalf, but this was different. It was like nothing else. Seeing my mother-in-law's anger, which was even greater than my own, my feelings gradually began to change. Mother-in-law, I was thinking that I should listen to Matt's feelings calmly and put the child first as if it was someone else's problem. But that's not natural, is it? I haven't been able to express any of my feelings to Matt at all. Moreover, I'm not satisfied with how he didn't mention anything about me in his letter. I feel like he sees me as nothing more than a helper, and I'm becoming less and less able to forgive him. I absolutely want to get revenge on Matt. Gradually, I could feel my anger swelling up inside me, and I couldn't stop it. And so, my mother-in-law and I began to plan together. Soon, it was my husband's payday, and my revenge began. It was while my mother-in-law and I were having dinner. There was a noise at the front door. It seems like Matt is finally back. As expected, her son had returned home, and my mother-in-law could hardly contain her laughter. Then, the intercom rang. "Who is it?" I responded calmly. Seeing me like this through the screen, my husband looked slightly scared. Still, he told me to open the door. Oh my, did the man who abandoned his wife and mother and left the house give up just in a half a month? My mother-in-law interjects with a teasing tone. I didn't give up. Don't steal my salary. My husband conveyed this desperately in a strained voice. You should have your bank book and seal, right? Don't mess with me. There should be other accounts. Actually, I had asked my husband's company to change the account for salary deposit to a different account. Let's make sure the salary doesn't fall into his hands. When my mother-in-law said this, I thought there was no way something like that could be done. She can say such outrageous things without flinching. Maybe her dementia is progressing. But then my mother-in-law started to say this while laughing. It's impossible to deposit his salary into an account that isn't under his name, no matter what. But if it's an account in his name, we can change the account for salary deposits. What do you mean? My mother-in-law called my husband's company and said, Mr. President, it's been a long time. Matt is always under your care. Well, actually, there's something I want to ask you. The president of my husband's company has a long relationship with us, and he considers my in-laws as his benefactors. He was willing to assist with the sudden request my mother-in-law made. Your salary is being deposited into an account under your name. However, it's the account under your name that I held. Oh, I didn't tell you that I had your account. My mother-in-law had owned an account under my husband's name, hoping to save a little bit at a time for him. And she consulted the president of my husband's company about changing the deposit of the salary to this account. If it weren't for the trust between the president and my mother-in-law, this certainly wouldn't have been possible. Wait a minute, it's my money. Yes, indeed. Your salary is what you earn from working. However, Natalie is your wife. You have a duty to provide living expenses to your wife Natalie from your salary. What? My husband was shocked upon hearing my mother-in-law's words. Matt, I still have the divorce paper that you gave me. I haven't signed them, and, of course, I haven't submitted them. So, I'm still your wife. What? Is that so? At first, I thought I'd submit the divorce paper right away. However, as I strategized with my mother-in-law, we concluded that there were more benefits to maintain our marital status, so I kept the divorce paper with me. If you were serious about wanting a divorce, you should have ensured that I properly submitted the divorce paper instead of leaving them with me. What a shame. After telling my husband this, I hung up the intercom and set it to silent mode. I've also changed the locks on the front door so the old key won't open it. And I've added a robust chain for extra security. I had installed security cameras in several places to monitor the outside, and the doors were thoroughly locked. From the security cameras, I could see my husband trying repeatedly to enter the house. However, after some time, it seemed he realized that he couldn't get in no matter what, so he eventually gave up and left. You can use this money any way you like, Natalie. No, I can't do that. My mother-in-law handed me the bank book in my husband's name. However, I had no intention of using these savings. Certainly, as a spouse, I have the right to receive living expenses from my husband's salary. However, I was able to cover my living expenses for the time being with just my salary. I received the bank book from my mother-in-law, but I put it directly into a drawer. A few days later, my husband returned. But this time, my mother-in-law and I had called him. We also invited his mistress and the child, who he claimed was his. Why is the president here? And who are you? That person is a DNA tester. I heard they can do testing on the spot, so I invited them. As I explained with a smile, my husband made a green face. I already told you the results, didn't I? I've heard it from your mouth, but I haven't seen the testing process or confirmed the written results. Speaking with an attitude that wouldn't allow any objection, my husband gave up and agreed to the test. What's wrong? You seem reluctant to take the test. I wonder if there's something inconvenience for you if the test is conducted. We don't mind either way, but you should have been told when we contacted you. Our condition is clearly established the parent-child relationship between you two through this DNA test. If you accept this condition, we will return the previous method of transferring my husband's salary, and we will submit the divorce paper. We asked the president of my husband's company to be present as a witness. Just get it over with. If it makes you happy, feel free to investigate thoroughly. Although he agreed to the test with a heavy sigh, his mistress's attitude was completely opposite. "Oh, are you leaving without taking the test?" The mistress gradually backed away, then forcefully pulled her child's hand and fled without a word. "Huh?" My husband was left speechless by the mistress's actions. Although it was clear from her behavior that my husband had been manipulated by lies, my mother-in-law and I relentlessly cornered him. Seeing my husband in a daze and unable to keep up with the situation, my mother-in-law said, "If I were her, I would first take the test, then consider running away after receiving some amount of money. Your mistress doesn't seem very savvy, does she?" I'll never forget the fear I felt when I saw my satisfied mother-in-law, realizing that she's not someone to be underestimated or crossed, despite her dementia. "But it's my kid, isn't it? Are you sure that the sample for that test was actually yours?" I flaunted the remaining documents of the investigation report right in front of my husband. "Your mistress seems to be quite popular. She's been telling the same story to all the men she was involved with during her pregnancy. Incredible, but it seems she has a favorite, a jobless guy she's been dating since her student days. It seems that this man is the real father of the child." "That's a lie." "Right? See for yourself. The address is also written in the document of the test result, isn't it?" After glaring at me, my husband rushed out of the house, holding the report in his hand. Pathetic. My mother-in-law and I, involuntarily shrinking, bowed to the president of my husband's company and the DNA tester, expressing our apology and gratitude. The president declined a token of our gratitude and even gave us a gift instead. The DNA tester kindly stated there were no additional fees and accepted the initial amount. After a while, my husband rang the intercom again. We couldn't help but laugh at him, persistently ringing it. She says the kid isn't mine, and all the money in my passbook is withdrawn, but she claims she knows nothing. The entrance lights illuminated by terribly depressed husband standing in the darkness, as if he was under a spotlight. My mother-in-law and I watched my husband under the spotlight-like entrance lights and laughed. "So why are you here?" Barely suppressing her laughter, my mother-in-law asked my husband, "What do you mean, why?" Even to my husband's feeble reply, my mother-in-law didn't soften her harsh attitude. "This is the home where the mother and wife you tried to abandon with a single letter reside. I assume you, who left to satisfy your desires, wouldn't think to cross this threshold again, right?" "Hey, Mom, enough already." "I wonder who you're calling Mom. Even if we divorce, we'll be strangers. But I do have a lovely daughter who is willing to take care of me, despite my demanding dementia. I don't have a child who would abandon their parent." Standing next to my husband, who looked sad and tearful, I remember being very happy to be confidently referred to as a daughter. "There's a sealed letter in the mailbox. Please take it with you. It contains the amount of money you need for your immediate living expenses, divided into small portions. Be careful to manage it, because if you use it all at once, you won't be able to live until your next payday. From next month, your salary will be transferred to your previous account." Natalie, I really need you. We can start over again, right?" my husband said with a hopeful expression. But I had absolutely no intention of starting over. "Handing over this envelope is my final sentiment towards you. I plan to file for divorce in a few days. Then we'll be strangers. Thanks for everything." "Please wait. It was my fault. I'll never do such a stupid thing again. Please forgive me just this once." With a beep, the conversation with my husband was cut off by my mother-in-law. After that, we gave up our house and moved. Before my mother-in-law developed dementia, she had set me up as her adult guardian. Therefore, I had the right to freely manage her property, which is why I was able to sell the house. I came to respect my mother-in-law's ability to foresee the future once again. Moreover, my mother-in-law's new residence is a live-in care nursery home. I live alone in a house near that facility. I live separately from my mother-in-law. However, because she's close enough for me to come see her every day, I was able to go back to work with peace of mind. Once I finished organizing my mother-in-law's assets and my new life settled down, I filed for a divorce. Of course, I demanded alimony from my husband. With a thoroughness that involves confirming multiple times with the lawyer to give me all the money in my husband's bank account as alimony, my ex-husband couldn't say anything and, as my mother-in-law said, gave me the entire amount. Although it's sad to have become strangers with my mother-in-law, we will continue to be good friends.